Okay, hi, I'm April Fisher. Um, Today I want to explore how women shaped the medieval world in ways that history often overlooks. So, the purpose of this presentation is to challenge stereotypes. We often think of the Middle Ages as a male-dominated era, and I want to highlight how women played vital roles across all areas of life. Um, I want to highlight women's contributions to domestic, um, spiritual, economic, and political spheres. And I want to look at this in a global perspective as much as possible. So, this is really a global story, not just a European one. And so, through that lens, let's go. My main argument is that far from being passive, medieval women were active participants in shaping society. So women fulfilled multifaceted roles. They influenced homes, economies, governments, and religious institutions. So I think that their stories have often been overlooked or excluded in the dominant narrative. And I feel like looking at the rest of this presentation, I want to use a gendered lens to examine their diverse experiences and reclaim the historical significance. So we want to get a full picture historically, make sure that we have a fully represented picture of history. Starting out with domestic life and family roles. So women, obviously, we know have strong roles in marriage, motherhood, and management. In 1215, at the Fourth Lateran Council, canon law formalized marriage, which was big implications for women's social and legal roles. So we also see motherhood as a central role with the production of heirs and inheritance and how important that was. Also in political alliances, not only was their own marriage also often a political alliance, but the marriages of their daughters and the roles that they played in creating those political alliances as well. There's also an estate management aspect here. So, especially among nobility, women ran large estates, especially men when men were away or deceased. We see that a lot in war or crusades. Um, this image here shows the marriage of Giovanni Arnolfini, and it reminds us how formal and structured these roles were. But women still did have influence. The photo in the back is an Islamic marriage contract. Moving into spiritual roles, this is an interesting topic in this era as well, because convents provided women with educational opportunities or opportunities within their community, sometimes even political power. Female theologians, like we've got Julian of Norwich here and Hildegard of Bingen, they were mystics and they were local spiritual leaders. They wrote visionary texts. Julian of Norwich is very famous for personifying God as a woman or as a mother, which was very radical for her time. And Hildegard of Bingen was a composer and an artist. Um, these women had the ability to be spiritual leaders, even outside of a formal church setting. So we've also got the Fontrad, um, Abby. I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced. I'm sure I don't speak French, but they, the significance there is that Fontrad was ran by women and that women managed even monks in the abbey. So there was an opportunity for them to be community and spiritual leaders as well in this or spiritual authorities really within religious and spiritual roles. The economy, this is where some of that globalization really comes in. We've got rural work, which tends to be farming, and we've got brewing of ale, and then we've got the spinning of textiles. And then in an urban setting, these goods were sold in markets, and markets were not exclusionary to women at all. And widows, in fact, could inherit their husband's business and become property and business owners themselves. So we've got documents from the Islamic world showing women buying land and negotiating contracts. Um, this these are Chinese women pounding silk. We've got women spinning, and in the background of this slide here, that's embroidery sold, created and sold by women. So economies were really, women were very crucial to the economy in many societies. Politically speaking, we kind of have a dual aspect here. So we've got the soft influence of a woman who is married to um, a reigning man, a man in power. But then we also have situations like Margaret of Anjou or Eleanor of Aquitaine, who governed their lands. Margaret of Anjou in the Lancastrian family um, dynasty during the Wars of the Roses, and Eleanor of Aquitaine had authority over both the French and English courts, and also led crusades. So we have some instances in which women were in political roles of power. We also see regency. So a woman has a child who the child is technically the ruler, but it's a child. So um, regency put women in positions of power, formal power even. Um, in Africa, we also see a lot of matrilineal cultures, some of that in Mesoamerica as well, where women were holding those formal leadership roles, and that was passed down through the women. So it's not really that these were few and far between. Not only was there like a soft influence, but there was also many instances of women in um, specific roles of power. We've also got some information on cross-cultural comparison. So women in the Islamic world in the Middle Ages had legal autonomy in areas like inheritance, property rights, and divorce. Women had vast amounts of power in the religious sector in Europe. Um, they were able to kind of act a little bit outside of the social norms that were restrictive at the time. In Africa, we talked about matrilineal societies and matrilineal power, but they also participated in trade. In China, women were constrained by Confucian values, but the textile economy was truly built on their work. And Mesoamerican women, we've got um, that they were farming, but they were also holding authority in ritual aspects as well, holding power in those ritual um, authority. When we talk about education and literacy, we have to talk about Christine de Pizan. Um, she was the first professional female writer. She wrote the Book of the City of Ladies. Um, the book directly challenges misogyny, which is very radical. She's in the late era of the Middle Ages, but she discusses how women, um, the importance of women in history, and it really helps us understand that women contributed to medieval literature and art and education in both religious institutions, in at court, and that women's voices shaped medieval culture as well. So female patrons supported writers and artists and influenced culture from behind the scenes by supporting those artists. And it it really represents that women's intellectual legacy was present in cultural history. Resistance. So women's spiritual power was both celebrated and feared. While many women were respected mystics and spiritual leaders, others were targeted as threats. So the witch burnings at Derenburg, shown here, they show how some women were persecuted for spiritual practices outside of the church's control. Um, Accusations of witchcraft often stemmed from fear of women's knowledge or healing practices or simply independence and sometimes literacy. So It's disturbing, but it really shows the darker side of spiritual life for women, and it shows the ways that subtle defiance needed to be found um, in medieval times for women. So, in closing, I think that it's important to remember that history must reflect the full story, that women were never absent from it, but rewriting history to include women really reshapes everything from household labor to royal courts. Women built and resisted and led. And that reclaiming their stories, I think, gives us a richer, more truthful view of the past. This final image is of the Bayeux Tapestry, which is famous and created by women. And I think this quote from Christine de Pizan in her anti-misogynistic work says, "Let us not forget that it is we women who weave history as much as we live it." So I think that it's a reminder that they were always there, um, just waiting for just waiting for us to see them. Thank you.